The charging system on this Farmall 300 isn't working properly. So in this video, I'll walk you through all of the steps to properly diagnose an existing 6-volt charging system on a tractor. We'll go through the generator, the voltage regulator, the gauges, the battery, and all the systems in between to show you how you can diagnose the system on your 6-volt tractor. Now, some people, when their 6-volt system goes bad, they would elect to convert it to a 12-volt system. If you want to do that, we have a complete tutorial for all of the steps involved with that. However, if you want to keep that original 6-volt system, this tutorial will help you diagnose and make repairs to your system. The first place that we'll start is by testing the battery. I have my voltmeter hooked up, and when I connect the terminals, it shows an output of 6.31 volts, which is good. This is a 6-volt battery, so if it's outputting 6.31, that's really good. Now I'm going to start the tractor and see if that increases. I've got my tractor in neutral. And idle there. It looks like we had just a maybe slight increase on there, ever so slight. Normally, if the charging system was working enough, we would want this to read 7.1 when the tractor is running. Another test that we can do to see if the system's working properly is I'm going to start it up and then I'll remove the ground battery cable. If I remove the ground battery cable and the tractor keeps running, that's a good sign. If it quits, then that would help us determine where the problem is. So I'm going to start it again. I'm going to set this whole meter aside since we don't need it for this step. Okay, so I'll start the tractor, put it in neutral. Okay, take this battery cable off. Here we go. Okay, now you can see that our tractor, okay, when I removed that ground battery cable, the tractor remained running. It was generating on its own rather than it would quit at that time if there was a problem within the system. Next, we want to analyze the voltage regulator. You can see that I have some test equipment hooked up here. It's ground there, and then if I attach the other end to this ground, we can test and make sure that the voltage regulator is indeed grounded properly. So I'll start the tractor up and we'll watch the gauge. If the gauge flips over to charge, then we know that there's an issue with the voltage regulator being grounded. There's a bolt up here at the top that sometimes would just need to be tightened up because this is kind of in a bad location where it's susceptible to not being grounded, or if you have just recently painted your tractor and you got paint on there, that would also be a indication that your ground could be bad. So we will start the tractor and watch the gauge. Then, once we've done that test and watched the gauge, then we will hook this up to our field terminal, which is down here. You can just snap that on there. And again, we'll click the button. And when we hook this up to the field, we are bypassing the voltage regulator and instead making the generator work straight through to the gauge. Again, we're going to watch that needle. If the needle flips up to charge, then that would be an indication that the voltage regulator is bad. So that's how we're going to test the voltage regulator and know if our problem is here or with the generator. So let's start the tractor up. And I'm going to flip over to the other side here and watch the gauge. Right now I'm on field. And I click the button and nothing happens. I'm going to switch this over and do grounded. And I'm going to have to hold it. Again, click the button. Okay, that's good. Okay, so what we determined there is that the voltage regulator on this tractor is okay, and the problem lies with the generator. You may determine elsewhere if you had different results on your gauge, then you could replace your voltage regulator if needed. We suspect that the generator may be an issue. We suspect that for two reasons. One is when we tested the battery and could see that when we tested it, it was giving out 6.3 volts and then not that much more. That's a sign that the generator would be bad. Secondly, when we tested the voltage regulator and we switched it over to field and the meter or the gauge didn't show any change. Those are both indications that the generator is bad, but we're going to also verify that here at the generator. So you can see that I have both of my wires removed, and I did put some tape over them since we're going to start the tractor, and with it laying there I don't want to have it arc at all. So we're going to move those to the side. We're going to start the tractor, and I have my meter hooked up. I'm going to ground and test. We should see 1.5 volts if the generator is working properly. If we see less, that'll be indication that the generator has some problems. So let's start the tractor up and see what we have. With the tractor running, I could sometimes get up to 1 volt. Sometimes it was even a little bit less than that. Like I said, it should be 1.5, so if it's only getting 1 volt, it is enough for the tractor to run, but not as good as it should be when we had that grounded. Also, I took the cover off in here so that we can peek inside of the generator and we can see some damage to the brushes. So we're going to take this generator off and we'll rebuild it. There are 2 bolts here at the bottom and 1 bolt at the top of your bracket, and then your belt can just slide over. Once you loosen that up, you can move the generator a little bit so that the belt will be freed up, and then you can take the generator off of the tractor. Now, it is important to know what kind of generator you have. This is one type of generator that would be on these Farmall tractors, and this is another type. Notice how the pulley on the ends are different. This one is fixed, it's one size, and this one is adjustable. That will affect the parts as well as the belt when you order those parts, so it's important to know which one you have. Of course, most of these generators should have a tag on the side that says Delco with a number. Neither of these ones do, and you might find the same on yours where it doesn't have the tag anymore. So that's a way you can identify and make sure that you get the right parts. Now flip this around. You'll see that there's 2 bolts here on the back, so we'll take those off, and then this back cover will come off. Okay, both those bolts pull out there, and then this back cover will come off. Let me tap it a little bit with the brass hammer, see if that helps it. There we go. That'll pull right out. Oops. Looks like my wires are still connected, so I'm going to get a little screwdriver. I did mark these wires so that we can get them back in the way that we did. I just marked this one with a corresponding mark on the side. You can use masking tape or whatever you have in your shop to mark that. I'm going to take both of these wires off. Oops. Chase down that screw while I can. And there's a little nut behind it. Okay, so there's our cover. Then this will pull off. You can snap that off as well. And then your outside shell will come right off to reveal the armature, which looks good. You want to make sure that it's not purple or bluish, any of that type of hue to it. This still looks good brass color. I have my armature in the vise. Notice that I have this clamshell clamp around it so that the vise isn't clamping onto the armature. It's just resting there. We don't want to clamp onto the armature and do any damage. So with that resting there, I'm going to free up this nut on the end first. Like that. Here's my nut. And I'm going to set that aside. And then I'm just going to tap on the end here. You want to be careful that your armature doesn't go dropping down onto the floor and damage it. So I'm just going to tap on it to loosen up the armature. I can see that it's moving. It's close. There it goes. Okay, just like that. I got the pulley in the clamshell here, and it's loose. There's a spacer on this back side which you can pull out and set aside and keep it for later. And then on this other side, there's these 3 screws on the cover which you can take off. This will expose the bearing which we'll want to replace. So there's a little bit, there's small washers behind these screws. It should come come right off. Okay, you can see our bearing is exposed. Ours is pretty worn out and it will just push right out for us. I do have the little felt behind there too. We'll put a new one of those in. On the side here, this is where you would oil your generator, and I'm just gonna stick a piece of wire through there, make sure that it's clean. And if it needs further cleaning, we'll go ahead and do that. We just wanna make sure that that passageway is really clean. Could be pretty gunked up from over the years. My cover is cleaned up, so now we're ready to put our new parts in. Here is the new replacement bearing. This is available from Steiner Tractor Parts, and it comes in the kit with the new brushes and the bushing for the other end. So we'll use the same felt and drop that in there. Then we have the washer. I think I need to do this without gloves. A little easier. There we go. Okay, the washer will set in there. Looks like my felt isn't, there we go. Okay, now we're ready to put our new bearing in. This will just drop straight in, and make sure that it goes in all the way. There we go. Now we can put the cover back on, and that'll go on there. Remember, we have these screws with a little washer behind them, and we'll tighten up all three of those. If I can get it started in the hole. There we go. Okay. So we'll tighten those up. Remember to put the spacer back on the other end, and then your this end will be completely rebuilt. That's all we're going to do on this end. So I'll tighten those up later. We'll move on to the other end here. This, you can see there's a similar setup with the 3 screws. So we'll take those 3 screws off. Here's where you put your oil in. But instead of a bearing, there's a bushing behind here. So we'll take that apart and get all the way down to that bushing removal. I'm tapping this bushing through, which you can see there. Notice that there is a notch on it. The new bushing, when it comes in your kit, does not come with that notch, so we'll need to add that back into our bushing before we replace it. We'll just copy and put it in the same location. Okay, I just finished cutting my notch in there. You can see that I just put the other one next to it so that I could easily match up, and that will look good just so that our oil can slide through that groove. You can see that I have my bushing driven into the cover here. I want to show you how I set it down. I have a socket here that the cover is resting on. I did that so that I'm not beating against these brushes and damaging them in any way. So when that rests on there, then you can use another socket that's about the right size and tap it down until it's flush. Now there is directional where you put that notch in the bushing. That's important that you get it back in the right spot. You'll notice on the cover that there is a wick underneath here, and that is the way that your groove would face. So you can, here's my old bushing, I'll just show you on here. The groove would face the wick. So you'd put it in like that and drive it through until it's flush. Then after you have the bushing on there, you just want to put your armature here and make sure that it does go in properly and slides around nice and it's tight. Ours is, you want to make sure that you didn't mushroom or damage that bushing in any way when you were installing it. So that fits on there nice, it's a good fit. Now I'm going to replace these brushes. Notice that they are spring loaded, and you'll want to test your springs and make sure that those are in good condition. If they aren't, you would want to replace them. Then there's these screws on the end. You can just screw it out a little bit so that you can loosen this and take out the old brush. Even if these brushes don't look worn, it's still good to replace them. And then you'll put your new brush in. Now you can see on the new brushes that there is a little bit of an angle. You want the angle to match the way that it goes around. So if you just look at it, you can figure out which way they go back in. Just like that. And then you can tighten this screw back up, and you'll do the same with the other 2 brushes on the cover here. Here is a close-up of my new brushes that are installed. You want to make sure that they're making full contact from top to bottom, and also you can set the armature in here just as a test to make sure that you got your angle facing the right direction on the end of those brushes. As a word of caution, when you're putting these in, make sure that you don't tighten these up all the way. If you do, they could crack and break. So just tight enough, you'll know when it's tight but not too tight. I am over here at a lathe and I have my armature in here. I'm going to start the lathe up and use a file just on the end here. I could take my finger and feel some groove on the end of the armature, which we don't want to have. We want to make sure that that's really smooth so that we can make good contact with the carbon brushes that are on the cover. So I'm going to start the lathe up and just use this file to shine it up a little bit, and then I'll show another technique with the sandpaper and show both methods to making sure that you have really good clean surface on the end of your armature there. So first I'll show the file. Just want to rock back and forth there just a little bit. Be careful not to touch the very end of it, only this tip here. So you could do that with the file until you feel that that's sufficient, and then you can just finish it off with a little bit of sandpaper to make sure that it's really smooth. One other really good thing to clean is to just take a pick like this and slide across these grooves to make sure that all of those little carbon deposits from the old brushes are cleaned out. I'm going to go all the way around that armature and clean out every single groove. You can see we get a little bit out there. One last thing before we finish up with the lathe here, I'm going to turn it on and just shine this up ever so slightly, this very end where the bushing is, just to make sure that that's really smooth, and then we'll be all set. Before I reassemble, I am going to put just a little bit of lube, just one drop on the end here, so we aren't putting it together dry. And then you just need a little bit, since when we put it together we will oil it. Then we can drop our armature down in here. I'm going to drop it down, but I got to have all three of the brushes pushed back while it goes in. A little tricky to do with two hands. There we go. Okay, that'll slide down. Set all our brushes on there. Okay, just like that is really good. Then there is this small dowel which matches this cover. You can see there's the hole where it matches up. So when we drop it down, it will be situated like that. I did clean off this cover a little bit so that it goes together a little easier for us. I'm just going to slide this until we reach the dot. I lost it. There we go. Okay, that's in like that. And also on the side here, you can see that my wires are outside of the hole. And I'm just going to screw those wires right back on to the brush terminal where it should be. My wires are secured and they're tucked in so that they won't short out. Then we're ready to put the cover that has the bearing in it on. Here there is a little notch that matches the dowel here, just like we saw on the other end. So I'm going to drop this down to where it's going to be about even, and it's going to push hard, so I'll just use a socket over the top of here. I did put a little bit of lube on this end as well, just like we did on the opposite end. I'm just going to tap this down. This collar or sleeve will just slide right over here. We did use some sandpaper and shined up the end of this shaft so it would go together easily as well. Before you take it out of the vise, you'd want to put one bolt through from the bottom and tighten it, and then you can take it out of the vise and put your second bolt through. Then you can finish up the assembly on this end. Remember the key. Then you can put your pulley on and then your nut, and then you're ready to put it back on the tractor. Now that we have the generator on the tractor, we wanted to start it up and see what type of voltage we're getting from each of these terminals. Remember that this is positive ground, so when you ground it and test it, you can see that there would be 1.5 volts on your voltage meter, and that's what you should see on your tractor as well. We'll hook up these wires, then we'll go to the other side and we'll polarize the voltage regulator next. Our voltage regulator here has a battery and a generator connection here. We want to set this to be positive ground. Since this is still a 6-volt system, it will be positive ground. So I have just a simple set of alligator clips here. I'm just going to flash it. It'll spark there. Okay, and that is all you need to do, and now your generator is set to be a positive ground. It's a simple step, but it's super, super important. With the tractor running and the engine revved up, you could see that this read about 7.2 volts, which is great. That's a big increase over where we started with when we began working on this tractor. Now, with that type of increase, with 1.5 volts at the generator and then 7 volts here at the battery, we know that our voltage regulator on this tractor is functioning properly. However, if you didn't see an increase at that with this type of test, then you would know that your voltage regulator is the problem, and you could replace it, and we'll walk you through that step. However, on this tractor, by this test, we know that our voltage regulator is good. If you did decide that you need to replace your voltage regulator, this is what the replacement part looks like. These are all labeled, and you can easily connect the wires that they go to, and of course you'd probably put them back in the same order that you took them off as well if it was properly installed. Sometimes when people put voltage regulators on, they have trouble getting a really good ground connection, but that's super important, so make sure that you have your voltage regulator thoroughly grounded. If you do take your voltage regulator off, again, you would need to repolarize your generator like I showed earlier. You definitely have to do that step when you mess with the voltage regulator as well. Additional parts that you could put on would be a new gauge. If your gauge on your dash isn't working properly, Steiner also sells a replacement gauge. So through all of these steps, I hope that you are able to repair the 6-volt system on your tractor. You can see how simple it is to rebuild the generator. Just put that brush kit in, and it's really affordable too. That way you can have a working charging system on your original 6-volt system. If you would like to watch more tutorials, visit our page www.steinertractor.tv.